Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, where we bring you the microscopic truths that make a macroscopic difference. I'm Ethan Foster, your resident observer of the human condition. I like to think of myself as the quiet voice of reason, though I've heard some folks say dry humor is my middle name.
And I'm Alara Skye, the brilliant, quick-witted mind who loves to poke holes in health myths and pass out comedic jabs with alarming precision. I guess you could say my job is to spice things up, but without the questionable chemical additives. Because who wants a side of titanium dioxide with their humor?
I certainly don't. Today we're exploring a highly controversial topic: titanium dioxide. It's that magical whitening agent that's been banned in Europe, but is still making surprise cameos in American food.
Yes, you'd think that something banned in an entire continent might raise alarm bells on this side of the pond. But apparently the U.S. Food and Drug Administration thinks we need a little bright white in our candy coatings.
Maybe they just don't want our confections to look dull, or they believe a pristine white frosting is so essential to the American psyche that we'd crumble without it.
An interesting hypothesis, Ethan. Let's break this down. Titanium dioxide is used to whiten foods like frosting, gum, and candy shells, so everything looks more vibrant. But behind that sparkly veneer, there's a lot going on at the cellular level.
Right. Researchers in Europe, and some in the US for that matter, are worried about how titanium dioxide, especially in its nanoparticle form, can slip through various barriers in our bodies and potentially cause DNA damage, inflammation, and a host of other issues.
Exactly. When something is on the nanoscale, between 1 and 100 nanometers, which is thousands of times thinner than a human hair, it can get around our body's usual security checkpoints. It's like a VIP pass for trouble.
I'm picturing a tiny sneaky ninja jumping the turnstile in the gut, dashing straight to the bloodstream, and then setting off little alarm bells in your liver or brain.
That's not too far off. Multiple studies confirm that titanium dioxide nanoparticles can accumulate in organs. This is not your grandma's Sunday frosting, where the biggest concern was sugar intake. Now we've got these invisible stowaways that might harm our DNA.
And once you mess with DNA, that's a big deal. You're altering the code that runs the entire cellular show. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified titanium dioxide as possibly carcinogenic to humans, which means there's enough concern to at least raise eyebrows.
But eyebrows remain suspiciously unraised in many corners of the U.S., perhaps overshadowed by the bright glare of artificially whitened baked goods. Meanwhile, the FDA still labels it generally recognized as safe.
Now, in fairness, the U.S. Right to Know group has taken a deeper look. They found that these nanoparticles might affect gut health, cause oxidative stress, and lead to genotoxicity, a word that basically means DNA sabotage.
Genotoxicity is definitely not a word you want associated with your snack break. It's like discovering your favorite cookie is also a microespionage agent against your genetic material.
That would not look great on a product label: ingredients, flour, sugar, partially hydrogenated oil, and stealth gene disruptors.
Maybe if the font were small enough, no one would notice. In any case, the problem is that the nanoparticles in titanium dioxide can breeze through your system, and some studies show them reaching the bloodstream. Once there, they can accumulate in tissues, including the brain.
And if they make it to the brain, we're talking potential neurological consequences. There's research suggesting these particles might even bump up the risk for conditions like Alzheimer's disease.
Precisely. In one animal study, they found that repeated exposure to titanium dioxide resulted in point mutations in the gene presenilin-1, which is associated with inherited forms of Alzheimer's disease. That's pretty concerning.
Let's also talk about the gut, since the gut is basically the unsung hero of overall health. Inflammation there can lead to a wide range of problems throughout the body, including metabolic issues, immune dysfunction, and more.
Correct. Some studies indicate that titanium dioxide can inflame the lining of the gut, mess with the microbiota composition, and reduce beneficial immune cells like CD4 T cells. We're basically driving away the gut's good cops, letting the troublemakers run amok.
And when your gut is in a state of disarray, you can experience bloating, discomfort, or even more severe conditions over time. The more processed snacks loaded with titanium dioxide you eat, the bigger the potential problem.
Right. Imagine your gut microbes as a robust city of essential workers. Suddenly, a wave of titanium dioxide moves in, damaging roads, polluting the rivers, and messing with City Hall. Over time, that city's efficiency declines, and the rest of the body starts feeling it.
That's a creative way to put it, but it fits. And if the gut is out of whack, you might see weight gain. One study highlighted that titanium dioxide could be linked to obesity-related disorders, probably because it disrupts the balance of bacteria that help regulate metabolism.
Great. So not only might your candy treat leave you with a sugar high and crash, it could also be quietly tampering with your waistline.
The trifecta of unfortunate side effects. Let's pivot to the question: why is titanium dioxide still lurking in U.S. foods if the evidence is this concerning?
The short answer? Regulatory differences. The European Food Safety Authority found enough evidence to impose a ban. Meanwhile, the FDA decided that existing data wasn't conclusive enough to warrant a full ban.
Which leaves consumers here in the US playing a game of dodge the toxic additive, or hoping that manufacturers will voluntarily remove it. Some brands are waking up, swapping it out for alternatives, especially after lawsuits and public pressure.
Yes, pressure works, but not everyone's on board, so it's up to us as consumers to take matters into our own hands and read those labels.
Exactly. Now, speaking of reading labels, titanium dioxide might not always appear under that exact name. It can be called E171, or it could just be unceremoniously listed under color added.
That's why you need a detective's eye when shopping. Candy, gum, frosting, baked goods. These are prime suspects. And if the label is vague, sometimes you might need to do a quick brand search online.
Let's outline a few practical tips. First, scanning ingredient lists is key. If you see titanium dioxide or E171, put the item back. No sense in playing Russian roulette with your DNA.
Right. Second, go for brands that are transparent. Some companies pride themselves on a clean label approach and will explicitly say they don't include certain additives.
Third, focus on whole, unprocessed foods as much as possible. When you're making your own treats at home, you know exactly what goes into them. No hidden nanoparticles.
Fourth, ask questions when you eat out or buy items at a bakery. If you see a super bright white frosting that looks like it came from a toothpaste commercial, consider inquiring about how they achieved that color.
And fifth, if you need a sweet fix, try natural sweeteners or real fruit purees. The color might not be as vibrant, but you won't get a side of aluminum-laced bleaching agent.
It's titanium, Ethan, not aluminum. But the point stands. Why go for chemical whiteners at all when there are natural options?
Apologies, I got my metals mixed. Let's blame it on potential nanoparticle infiltration in my neural pathways. Jokes aside, it's about being mindful. A bright white donut might seem appealing, but is it worth the potential risk?
Let's also consider the broader picture. Titanium dioxide is not limited to foods. It's in sunscreen, certain cosmetics, and even some medications. So if you want to limit exposure, it might be worth checking labels for those products as well.
True. The conversation often centers on candy and frosting, but personal care products are another major source. Breathing in titanium dioxide dust is also an issue for some industrial workers, but that's probably outside our scope today.
Indeed. Now, let's circle back to the main health effects for a final rundown. First, you've got the potential for DNA damage. We're not talking about something that might irritate your skin temporarily. We're discussing fundamental cellular processes being compromised.
That's huge. Second, we have inflammation in the gut, leading to changes in gut microbiota and possible digestive problems.
Third, there's a link to weight gain and metabolic disorders, because once your gut is off balance, your entire metabolism can go haywire.
Fourth, the possibility of neurotoxicity and an increased risk for things like Alzheimer's. Not a comforting thought when you just want a quick sweet treat.
Correct. Fifth, potential effects on unborn children and infants. Studies have shown that exposure during pregnancy might alter offspring's respiratory systems and even neural functions.
That's a lot of red flags for something we use just to make candy shells look more photogenic.
Precisely. If we're prioritizing aesthetics over health, that's a problem. I get that industries want their products to look appealing, but we should question whether the cost is too high.
Let's talk about what you might notice on labels besides titanium dioxide. We mentioned E171, but also watch out for words like whitening agent or colorant. Sometimes they don't specify which colorant.
Exactly. It's important to realize that color added might mean a whole spectrum of chemicals. If the product specifically lists titanium dioxide, that's your clarity. If it doesn't specify, you can always hop online to see if that brand is known for using it.
Some folks may think, but if it's just a small quantity, is it really that bad? The issue is the cumulative effect. You're not necessarily encountering titanium dioxide once in a blue moon. If it's in your candies, your gum, your toothpaste, your face powder, that's a repeated exposure.
Right? And nanoparticles can accumulate over time. Our bodies don't necessarily break them down efficiently. So a little here and a little there adds up to more than you might realize.
Which brings us to the question of regulatory thresholds. The FDA might say a certain percentage in food is safe, but that doesn't account for multiple sources over a lifetime.
Precisely. Or differences in individual sensitivity, genetics, or existing health conditions. Some people might be more vulnerable to inflammation or have compromised immune systems.
So basically the safest route is to limit exposure as much as you can. Doesn't mean you can never eat a piece of candy again, but maybe choose brands that skip titanium dioxide.
That's the beauty of living in a time with so many options. There are smaller, more conscious brands that refuse to use questionable additives. It's a matter of seeking them out.
Let's also not forget that color is marketing. If a product is super bright, it's probably enhanced by something. Real food often has a subtler look, and that's okay. We should probably realign our expectations of what good food should look like.
Amen. Food doesn't need to be neon to be enjoyable. I'll take a slightly off-white frosting made with real butter and sugar over a glow-in-the-dark version any day.
Let's pivot to a quick recap. Titanium dioxide is banned in Europe because of evidence linking it to DNA damage, inflammation, and even carcinogenic or neurotoxic properties. The US still allows it, so it's on us to avoid it if we choose.
Precisely. If you remember one phrase from today, it should be, read the labels. Even though it's common sense, many of us still skip that step.
We do, we're in a hurry, or we trust brand marketing. But taking 10 seconds to read an ingredient list might spare you a lifetime of cumulative exposure.
Indeed. Another tip is to reduce your intake of processed foods overall. Cook at home, use whole ingredients, and you'll automatically dodge a lot of these weird additions.
It's funny how so much of health advice boils down to that. Fresh whole foods rarely come with disclaimers about genotoxic substances.
Exactly. Warning: this apple contains potential carcinogens, not something you see often. But warning: this frosted donut might include DNA-altering particles. That's a reality.
It sure is. Now, let's chat about real-life scenarios. Suppose you have a kid who loves colorful candy. Would you say the best approach is to steer them toward candy that uses natural dyes?
Yes. There are brands nowadays that use things like beet juice or carrot juice to color candy. The shades might be slightly different, but kids typically don't mind if the flavor's still good, and it's certainly better than a side of nanoparticles.
Good point. Another scenario. Frosting on a birthday cake. Could we just make our own at home using organic powdered sugar and butter, skipping any whitening additives?
Precisely. Homemade frosting is simpler than you'd think, and you can control the sugar content as well. If you need color, natural food colorings are widely available, made from vegetables and spices.
Let's also address gum. A lot of gum contains titanium dioxide. If you chew gum regularly, you might be exposing yourself daily. Are there clean label gums out there?
Yes, some niche brands avoid titanium dioxide and artificial sweeteners. You might pay a bit more, but if you're a habitual gum chewer, it's worth considering.
Absolutely. Another angle. People sometimes check sugar levels or artificial sweeteners in gum, but overlook the colorants. So watch out for that.
That's right. So many angles to consider. But once you're in the habit of reading labels, it becomes second nature. Instead of scanning just the calorie count, you hone in on the fine print.
And if we collectively start demanding cleaner products, companies might feel the pressure to remove additives like titanium dioxide. That's how progress often happens.
Yes, consumer demand can shape the market. If enough of us say no thanks to questionable ingredients, brands will adapt or lose business.
Let's revisit that 2025 study you mentioned about neurotoxicity. The notion that titanium dioxide might directly contribute to Alzheimer's is jarring, to say the least.
It is. The study noted these particles might bind to receptors in neurons, causing oxidative stress and inflammation. These changes could fuel the formation of amyloid beta peptides, a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. That's not the kind of risk we want in our candy bowl.
No, it's not. And if someone has a family history of Alzheimer's, they might be particularly cautious about accumulating potential neurotoxic substances.
Precisely. We're not saying a single bag of Skittles leads to immediate memory loss, but repeated, long-term exposure could contribute to a risk profile that many want to avoid.
At the end of the day, the argument that titanium dioxide is just a little colorant doesn't hold water when you see the studies. The cumulative effect might be significant.
Right. And that's why Europe banned it. They saw enough evidence to say, let's just remove this from the food supply. Not a radical concept, just a precautionary one.
Meanwhile, we're still in wait-and-see mode, which often ends up being learn-the-hard-way mode years down the line.
Exactly. It would be nice if we could be proactive about these things instead of waiting for conclusive proof that usually arrives after the damage is done.
So, what's your biggest piece of advice for folks who feel overwhelmed by all these hidden ingredients?
Keep it simple. If you can't pronounce an ingredient, or if you suspect it's a sneaky chemical compound, consider whether that food is truly necessary. Also, do a quick search for cleaner alternatives, because they do exist.
That's good advice. And hey, we can always celebrate the subtle, natural colors in food. Not everything has to glow like a neon sign.
Precisely. Our obsession with super bright hues is a marketing tactic, not a nutritional necessity. Maybe we should embrace subtlety in color, as well as in life.
Spoken like a true sage. So, to wrap up, titanium dioxide is banned in the EU. It's still legal here. It's associated with DNA damage, gut inflammation, potential neurotoxicity, obesity links, and other concerns. If that sounds alarming, the solution is to read labels, choose natural options, and focus on whole foods.
Exactly. We all have the power to vote with our wallets. If enough of us say no to questionable additives, the market will pivot. In the meantime, if you see that bright white sheen on your snack, think twice.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's our deep dive into titanium dioxide. The moral of the story: a little whiteness in your candy shell might come with a big cost to your cells.
And on that note, I'll add one final reminder. Your body is more precious than the fleeting moment of candy bliss. Choose wisely.
Indeed. Thanks for tuning in to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. I'm Ethan Foster, reminding you that the shiniest foods might not have the shiniest health outcomes.
And I'm Alara Sky, signing off with the hope that we all prioritize real nourishment over marketing magic. Until next time, stay curious and keep that label reading game strong.
Take care, everyone, and keep looking out for those sneaky nanoparticles. They might be small, but their impact is anything but. Stay healthy.
See you next time, folks. Let's keep our cells happy, one smart choice at a time.